I'm so honored to meet you, Shawn.
No, it's my pleasure, my honor.
Oh, awesome, awesome. After talking to all these experts and all these folks who have made a tremendous impact in the kettlebell world, I've always heard your name. So Shawn Mozen, you got to talk to Shawn Mozen, the guy who brought the kettlebell to Canada. So I'm highly interested in your story. I have a lot of stuff that I want to ask you.
Sure.
And so let's just start off with your story, how it started with
Yeah.
kettlebells, how you brought it to Canada. And I really appreciate you having on the channel. Awesome.
Yeah. No, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. And yeah, it's a wild story. So I always tell people, I was just giving a seminar out of town over the weekend. I gave a kettlebell certification in Toronto,
Mm,
and I go around the room at the beginning. We always ask everybody to introduce themselves.
mm,
Tell everyone where you're from. Do you have any injuries? Something I should know before we begin. Also, your experience with kettlebells. And
mm,
then,
mm.
when we've gone all the way around the room, we get back to me. I introduce myself and I do the same thing. And I tell everyone my experience with kettlebells. And I
Awesome.
tell them, I said, well, I introduced them in Canada. And so people go, what's that mean? And I said, well, for everyone listening right now, try to think back to a time where, if you can imagine, you walk into a gym, there's no such thing as a kettlebell. No one has one. You go to a fitness store to buy some equipment, it's impossible. You can't buy a kettlebell. There's nothing. And you look online and there's nothing. Maybe one video on YouTube, one little, small short clip.
Yeah, back when YouTube was very even in its early days, right?
Yes. So there
Wow.
was so there was nothing. So back then is when I got interested. I've always done martial arts since I was a little kid, so since 7. And so through the martial arts, I became interested in training and getting stronger, becoming more flexible, and most importantly, being well-rounded, being what I commonly call and
Mm.
what people sometimes call being a generalist, a good generalist. So
Generalist. Oh, I love it.
yeah, so
Generalist.
someone that moves well, is strong, has good endurance, has a good balance, a good mix.
Mm,
Because especially for martial arts, that's always the people that I admired the most, the people that I found the most impressive were the ones that had a good mix of skills, good mix of attributes, and those were the people I wanted to emulate. And as I trained more and got more into things, I also realized that this was such an important thing. That balance was so great, not just for your physical ability, but also for your mental ability and your longevity. I mean, it's
mm,
fantastic to just be incredibly strong, but
mm.
usually people who are just incredibly strong, they also kind of stiff. They suffer, the problems of that specialization. The same thing can be said of people who are incredibly flexible or anything very far in one specialized way.
Mm.
So training and then eventually teaching martial arts for a very long time, I was always on the lookout for interesting ways to train, interesting ways to improve for myself and for my students. And at one point I was training some Russian guys and I was playing around with some different types of martial arts and some Russian martial arts. And one of the Russian guys would show me some what he called circus stuff, you know, and
And
was
can you chronologically what time frame do we have to
I'm
keep in
horrible
mind?
with exact time frame because like I always tell people, I say, look, I've been traveling around the world now teaching for like around 20 years.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so I've jumped so many time zones, so many times that I literally will tell a story and someone will say, I'll say, okay, so there was like a couple of years ago, I did blah, blah, blah. And then someone there will go, by the way, that was 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
going to say this is around 2000, but please, anyone
Mm.
listening, if the timeline is completely wrong, you're probably right. So
Love
I'm
it.
not going to argue with anyone. I'll argue
Love it.
about all kinds of other stuff, but yeah, like somewhere
Love it.
around 2000, right?
Mm.
And because also life is backwards for me, I work on the weekends mostly, traveling and giving seminars. So everything is upside down in terms of trying to track time. But
Okay.
yeah, like around 2000, something like this, I started doing with some of my students or some Russian guys. They showing me what they call like these circus lifts, or one guy you would say this is circus shit. So I'm like, okay, we're doing circus shit. So they showed me how to do a bench press with a barbell and some stuff I had never seen anyone doing in a gym, and I liked it. I was like, wow, this is really cool and has a very interesting effect. And I've always been curious about this kind of stuff. And right around the same time, I start seeing some ads for this weird looking weight with a cannonball with a handle. And frankly, the ads were very over the top with their marketing. What I kind of like, being a Canadian, I know most people in the world thinks Canadians and Americans are exactly the same, you know, because we're on this side of the world. But I think our sensibility when it comes to marketing is slightly different. Now, if you're American, don't be offended by this, because a lot of American style marketing obviously works on Canadians as well. But when I hear things like, the kettlebell is the secret weapon of the Soviet Spetsnaz, I giggle. I think it's funny. And I know, you know, and I see people kind of in uniform working out, you know, I think, oh, that's cute. I wonder if it's any good, you know? And I know there's a lot of other people, they get very excited and they go, oh my God, the secret weapon of the Soviet Spetsnaz. Oh, I could have the secret weapon of the Soviet.
And you know what Steve Cotter taught me? He said, you know, he called it the foreign man from a foreign land.
Yes, 100%.
And this intrigues, right? Curiosity and mystical stuff.
My friend is right. If you want, Steve is right. You know what? For me, I would be so much more successful. I live in a French part of Canada. I should throw on a fake French accent, even though I'm an Anglophone. I should throw it on and it would be good, or I could throw on a different one. That's always somehow sexier to everyone if you've got that accent and you're from somewhere bringing over a secret. And I don't know if Steve mentioned this to you, but Steve and I were in Russia together, and I like to come back and tell the story. I like to tell everybody the truth to kind of like, you know, blow the marketing apart. Said, do you know what people were doing when Steve and I were in Russia in a gym training kettlebells with Russians? Do you know what the Russians were doing? Do you know what kind of exercise they were doing?
The only thing, if I just backtrack a little bit, what I know, what Steve told me is, he said we went to the States. A couple of Americans and I, we went to the States, and that was probably back in that time frame, probably around the 2000s. And so the question was, what kind of exercise were the Russians doing? Or
because at one point, this is like later in the story, but it's still funny to say it now. But you know, because of we're talking about the marketing in early 2000, but much later, Steve ends up in Russia. I end up in Russia. And do you know what kind of workouts Russians were doing in that gym where we were training? Like, we were with some Russians doing kettlebell, but the locals, when they were in the gym, do you know what they were doing? Because they weren't doing kettlebell.
They weren't doing kettlebells. Oh
no, they had no interest in kettlebell. The ones that were working out in that gym.
Wow. What kind of workout did they do without any kind of body weight stuff?
No, like everybody thinks they were doing, like, I tell the story and people guess, they go, oh, they were doing Olympic lifting, or they were like, everybody has visions of Rocky in their mind, right? No, there was a nice guy there. He asked me, he goes, what are you doing here? And I'm like, oh, I came to do kettlebell training, you know, giri. He goes, oh, giri. Huh. You don't have giri at home? I go, no, thanks to me, we do have giri at home, but yeah, we have it at home. I came here to learn, you know, in Russia and get better. He goes, I go, what are you doing? He goes, pec deck. We got new pec deck.
I love it.
And then he looks at me and goes,
now I get where you're coming from. Yeah. I love it.
He goes, you want to blast your pecs? And I'm like, you know what? I haven't blasted my pecs since the 80s. And I got to be honest with you. I like the invitation. I got to go do some more kettlebell, but I will definitely come back and I'll blast my pecs with you, you know?
Love it.
So that's why when I heard in 2000, the kettlebell is the secret weapon of the Soviet Spetsnaz, I took that with a grain of salt, as anyone should when they're listening to marketing. I'm like, okay, you're marketing this very heavily, that it's this awesome thing. That doesn't mean that it's not awesome. That just means, you know, you're making a hard sell, a hard push. So let me take a look. I asked my guys, this is like, this is the kind of thing you're talking about with the kettlebells? Because they had told me about kettlebells, these weights they used. They told me they use kettlebells, they use barbell, they use everything. I was like, cool. They said, yeah, that's the idea. I said, all right. To this day, I don't even really know why I made that decision to jump on a plane and go down to the States and you know, train and do that course, because it's kind of outlandish if I think about it. At that point, I mean, the course was crazy expensive. The US Canadian dollar made it insane. Like, the difference was wild.
Wow, so the currency really difference? Wow, okay.
Yeah, it really cost me a lot of money.
Wow.
And like, you know, I'd be pulling a fake number out, but let's say it costs over 3,000 between everything and travel, maybe even 3,500 between the travel and then having to buy a kettlebell, and like, it was nuts. $3,500, $3,500 to go learn a weight that you
Yeah.
can't buy, that nobody's interested in, that it's completely stupid, to be honest with you. It's like, I don't know. I don't know why.
But somehow you went. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
But next
Something
thing I know, I'm
peaked
on
in
a
you.
plane and I go down. And so this, I think it ends up around 2002, something like that, right? It's the same. It's the same RKC that Steve Cotter and so many of the other guys that became well known. We were all at the same one at the same time. That's how Steve and
Wow.
I met, and we ended up hitting it off right away. We became friends, maybe because we're short and neither one of us would have to look up to the other one and hurt our necks.
Love it. Love it.
Maybe that's it, because we're travel size, or maybe because we both love martial arts. But guys like Steve Cotter, Jason C. Brown, who's another incredible guy, not only a very good kettlebell instructor, but just a great human being, a very nice guy. We've stayed in touch over the years, and he's tremendous. He's a great guy. He's one of those guys where yeah, right since that day, we always stay in touch,
Jason
And
C. Brom?
yeah, Jason C. Brown. Yeah.
Brom. All right.
Yeah. If you want, I'll put you in touch with him. Jason is a
Yeah.
great guy. Jason was
Awesome.
there. Same thing with Steve. Jason went on to teach a lot of seminars for Equinox Fitness. And
Yeah.
all over the
Equinox.
States, he was, so I think maybe because he had that kind of steady gig and he was just going around and training them. He wasn't running around the world like Steve and I. So maybe not everyone knows about him, but I always feel, especially in this crazy business where there's lots of, I'm trying to find a nice word, scumbags and liars. So that's the nicest thing I could say. If there's somebody who I know that is a good human being, I always like to say it, because unfortunately, sometimes people ask you about somebody you know who's not. And if you say anything negative, all of a sudden you look bad. You're like, oh, but so the best thing I can do is always in the affirmative and try and be positive and say, look, yeah. So, Steve and I hit it off. Jason and I hit it off. There were guys there. A lot of the guys that went on to become well-known, they were all there at that one. I think they had only maybe had two other RKCs before the one that I ended up at. So it was very,
So
very new.
early, very early in the game.
Super new, right?
Wow.
And so then I come back to Canada and I really enjoyed it. I had a great time. I met some really great guys that I stay in touch with over the years. And but when I came back to Canada, there were no kettlebells. You could not buy a kettlebell. You could not realistically bring them in from the States, because first of all, the ones from Dragon Door, let's face it, were ridiculously priced. And fair enough, because they were the only ones that had them. So if you're the only one that has something, you can charge whatever you want. But with the exchange, with the shipping, with everything, I forget exactly, but I'm probably actually not very far off, because don't forget, we have to pay customs fees and everything. It would have cost me, if I wanted to bring a 16-kilo bell in, it would have cost, like, and that's 35 pounds for you guys, or 36. It would have cost something like $250 for like the one. Yeah, it would have been. So imagine if you come back with this training, what am I going to tell a client? Hey, yeah, we're going to do this awesome thing. It's called kettlebells. It's a Russian weight. It's the secret weapon of the Soviet Spetsnaz. It will make your fat jump off your body and run crying to its mother. Okay. They're super pumped. They're like, what do I need? Okay, well, you're going to have to buy your own weight. How much is it? It's $250. They'd send me to get my head examined. And then I'm going to pay you. And I'm like, yeah, and then you got to pay my fee.
Yeah. The coaching, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know anybody who would be a brilliant enough marketer to kind of get people excited about that project, or what am I going to do? I'm going to fill my gym full of kettlebell weights at that kind of price. I mean, I might as well just gold plate the gym and make it look all cool, So a lot of things happened out of necessity, because after I left, I was basically on my own. Nobody offered me any help, anything. So like Steve, years later, we were hanging out together and he said, man, you were smart. You went out on your own. You did it right away. I told him, I go, Steve, it's not like I had this great plan and I was so smart. No one offered to help me. So
wow. Necessity, right? Necessity.
Yeah, I was stuck. I'm sitting here. I'm like, I like this. I think it's good. I have something to show people. I have something to say about it. I think I can show it in a way that's going to be really helpful and people are really going to like this, but I can't do it, just like this. And so I started looking for ways to make the kettlebells. I started visiting foundries. The price was crazy. They also had no clue how the hell to make this really.
Wow, foundries. So you
Yeah.
actually thought about
Yeah.
doing them on your own, right?
Yeah, I was going to make it in
producing
Canada.
them.
We were going to try and figure it out, but
Yeah.
the price was just so prohibitive. It was just crazy. And then
Wow.
I eventually I got in contact with people overseas that could make them for me. But I mean, at this point, I'm living in a little apartment. In the winter, it gets really cold here. In the summer, it gets hot, like as hot as anywhere. You know, it can be over 100 degrees, 110, right? It's really, really hot. But in the winter, we could be talking about minus 40. Right. So it's brutal. And I'm sitting in an apartment and I decide, again, another kind of business wise, very stupid thing, maybe if it doesn't work. I decide now that I've paid a lot of money for training that nobody's heard of. I'm now going to shut the heat off in my apartment and I'm going to take what little money I have and I'm going to buy the first 50 units of 16 kilo kettlebells. Wow. And I'm going to import them. I'm going to learn how to import from overseas. I'm going to import them in. So now I'm going to have 50 kettlebells that no one in the country knows what they are and nobody wants.
Yes.
Yes. Wow. At this moment in time, it's also worth saying that, you know, my father, who's an accountant, thought to himself, my son, the idiot. And I don't blame him at all. Wow. Because this is not a smart thing to do.
You turn off the heat in.
Yeah, because I could not afford to heat and do all these things in my apartment and at the same time buy kettlebells. So it was one or the other. So I was trying to save money everywhere that I could. So I was like, the heat was very low, just enough that the pipes don't break. If anybody who lives in a cold place, you know, like you have to be careful. The pipes can freeze and you'll have massive damage. So I had the heat so low. At one point, I look back now, I remember writing kettlebell articles at my computer, and it was so cold in the apartment, you could see my breath.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I had like little fingerless gloves on, you know? And I'm like, the kettlebell is really good because it works the posterior chain, you know? And I'm like just freezing to death in my apartment.
I love it, man. That's dedication. Yeah. That's dedication. Wow.
And but in retrospect, when I think about it, I think to myself, I'm so fortunate that it worked out, but man, that was like some really weird choice. Like, why did I do that? I don't even know why I did that.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask, Shawn, because I mean, being convinced to a point where you are willing to decrease life's conveniences in your own home just to import something that's so brand new from overseas and get it working. That must, if you think back, it's just something that you were thinking like, this is going to work. I believe it. I believe in it. Or was like, well, let's take it. It's a lucky shot. Let's try.
Yeah. I mean, I just knew I was right and I knew people were wrong. And I thought there's got to be a way. Like there's enough people will see that I'm right. Like I would even bring it to gyms and I would show people and they would look at me and they would all look at me like I was stupid. I would show them the swing and the same people, they would look at, and the more degrees they had after their name, the dumber they thought I was. They would look at me and I would hear, do you know how bad that is for your back?
Lower back.
Yeah. And then I'd get this face and I would look at them and I would, you know, I'd start to explain to them, no, and I explain to them how it's done and explain why it's very safe. And, you know, and some of them, you know, I would get them. Other ones, no. And then the ones that I didn't get, which is my personal favorite because I'm a petty little man. I like it when I can prove people wrong and it takes them years to figure it out. The same people years later would call me, contact my company and hire me to come in and give a cert. And they would go, Shawn, I don't know if you remember, but we actually, I go, no, I remember exactly who you are.
I do remember, my man.
And then they go, oh, well, you know what? It's so amazing. Like Dr. Stuart McGill did this thing on kettlebells. And do you know how good, I go, yeah, how good they are for your back? Yeah. Let me tell you something. I was here 6 years ago. You could be 6 years ahead. But better late than never. And then I laugh at them a little bit and then we move on because that's fun. You know, that's fun. That's one of the little joys of life. You know, it's like coffee, you know, it's like one of the little joys of life. It's like, oh, well, you could be ahead 6 years, but you know, instead you weren't listening and you were convinced I was wrong, but hey, whatever. Nice to see you.
You know, we're waiting for approval. You know, that's something that even in today's day and age that we live in, we only think it requires degrees or some certain education for people to think clearly or for people to understand even something. I mean, if you are a specialist in something,
Yeah.
we can say that some of it depends on education, but I'm just reading the book Grit from Angela Duckworth, where she's talking about the grittier people are, persistence and perseverance and passion and following it, and this is how you actually become an expert.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's something that
But you said it though,
amazes
you
me. Yeah.
need, you waiting, people are waiting for confirmation from enough people. They need to hit a critical mass of people that
Critical
agree with
mass.
something,
Oh, I love
and
it.
then they jump on it.
Critical
And
mass.
you know, you ask people and you watch people on, especially fitness people, you look at their social media and everyone's posting memes, be a leader, be this. It's like, but it's easy to post a meme. It's very hard to actually be that thing. And the truth is, most people aren't. Most people are waiting for enough people to accept some concept. And then once it hits a number that somehow they're like, yep, okay, looks, coast is clear, looks safe.
The coast is clear.
I can
I'm
say
not going to
that
look
now.
stupid now.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm not going to look like a moron or have
Yeah,
to
yeah. I
explain
love it.
myself,
I love it. Yeah.
because 90% of the room agrees,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah. So
I'm going to do it. I
love it.
post whenever I post this video. I posted a video on TikTok for jiu-jitsu, and it was like just common mistakes for defending a rear naked choke. One of the things I said is you shouldn't tuck your chin. And I can tell you that gets the people the most pissed off of just about anything I've ever said. And I'm very simply, for people that don't know jiu-jitsu, I'm basically saying don't block with your face, which if I was saying it in boxing, there's enough people that understand that blocking with your face is stupid, right? That's not a desirable thing. Your face is not meant. Now, if someone knows how to do a real choke, like properly the mechanics to generate tremendous force, putting your jaw in as a way to stop the choke will only snap your jaw and then you'll be strangled anyways. So it's not a smart thing to do, but a lot of people think it is. So instead of, when I say don't do that, there's better ways to do it, it's a mistake. Instead of people going, really?
why do you think that is?
Yeah.
Why
And
do
what
you
would be
think
the
that-
better way? Because I would like to not block with
Yeah.
my face. So
Yeah.
tell me more. Instead, they immediately get pissed and tell me I'm an imbecile.
Oh, same. Same happened on. I mean, this probably happened to you as well, and we're probably going to get into it. When I teach something, on Instagram or just, but I just realized I'm putting 30-second videos where you explain it in a very short, brief way, kind of like Squat University does it. Dr. Aaron Horschig works very well. That I was just talking about the hand insertion. And talking about how when you grab, actually get the kettlebell in the rack position, that especially with the competition kettlebells and the rack is deep enough or the hand insertion is deep enough, don't try to grab the handle, just close the fist. Because if you try to grab the handle, then you overextend your wrist and then it starts hurting. And people were like, nah, man. Because it's always, and I love it, what I think Dennis Vasilev even said this when I had him on the podcast. He said, people are always going to think about what they have been exposed to first.
Yes.
So I've been exposed to the idea of, let's say, just hard style, and then if you see anything else, it's like, ooh, that's wrong. Instead of being like, hey, why is it? I've never seen that.
Yeah.
And why is that? Right? Asking, curiosity. No, it's
because the mind kind of closes because they're terrified of what they might see over here. So if you see something over here that's not part of what you've been doing, and you maybe have to reevaluate or change, or it's going to be a lot of work, it's easier to just ignore this, right? I remember talking to a guy and he said, listen, at my gym we only do authentic Russian kettlebell.
okay.
And I go,
Okay.
huh? Okay, well, that's interesting. I go, very, very interesting. That sounds so super cool. So it's the authentic. So, and now I'm like, because I'm a bit of a dick, I go, so like it's really just the authentic Russian way to do it, right? And he goes, yeah. And I go, okay. And I'm talking to the guy and I see people train, and I go, so like what they're doing over there with the two-hand swing, right? And he goes, yeah. And I go,
Very
nobody
Russian.
in Russia does that. And he goes, what do you mean? I go, I'll hop on a plane right now with you, and I will bet you anything you want that, and if we find a Russian doing it, it's a Russian trying to get some business from the United States. And he's basically going like this. Look, I swing like you guys. Okay, come take my course. Come on, let's go. Okay. Instead of $1,000, whatever, 50, whatever you got, let's go. Okay.
Yeah.
I go, Russians don't swing kettlebells like that. So what you think is authentic Russian Just sit down, we'll have a coffee, I'll explain to you why you know nothing, and then we can move from there. And then if you want to keep doing that, absolutely do it, because it makes you happy, you like it, you think it's valuable, fits for your clients, whatever. It makes no difference to me. But don't run around thinking what you're doing is somehow related to Russia and is the Russian way to do it. That's not right. It's wrong. So if you're really curious and you want to find out, let's go. And that's the thing, like way back when I started, everybody was doing what they had seen from the RKC, right? Everyone was doing that. That was the perception that was Russian kettlebell training. You know, that's it. And it took some time. It took people like myself that were curious, like Steve, that were curious, that were going to go hop on planes, go to the other side of the world, go hang out in Russia and go see what was going on. And then, you know, things changed after that because, you know, again, it was like, okay, well, that's not what's going on over there. That isn't what, you know, kettlebells are, the way that they're trained in you know, in Europe and all over Russia. And it's not to say that there's not value to it, but people, even to this day, they have a very weird perception of kettlebells because the marketing is so heavy from the hard style.
Most definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. That they think that this is the Russian way. Like one of the very first things I teach at every seminar, it's like within the first 20 minutes, I explained to people, I said, all right, guys, I want you to show me, everybody here swings kettlebells. Show me the Russian swing, show me the American swing. Okay, this is the first thing. Saturday morning, last Saturday, this is what I did. This weekend, I have a seminar. I'm going to do the same thing. Show me American, show me Russian. So everybody goes like this, and then they go like this. I go, good. That's the American, that's the Russian. Everyone in the room goes, yes. I go, you're all wrong. Good thing you came. Good thing you came, because you're going to go into the world. You're going to teach people. I said, you've ever seen this in articles online? They go, yeah. I go, everyone who wrote an article like that's an idiot. They don't know what they're talking about. And that's the problem right now we have. And this is not just a problem for kettlebells. We have more technology. Look at this. We're on other sides of the world. You and I are talking. We're sharing information. This is going to be put up in different places. People can see it. But the bloody problem is the technology is great, but because everyone has a platform now, everyone's an expert. And if everyone's an expert, no one's an expert. So people write articles, people post stuff. When I started, you know, in 2002, getting an article out and getting it in a magazine was a bloody effort. It was hard. Getting on TV to show kettlebells was hard, you know, and you couldn't just post it on your social media. There was none of that. So if you became famous or well-known for something, man, you really had to be an expert. Now, what do you have to have? You just have to have like a butt that's not dripping down into your ankles, a half decent body, a good camera, you know, and you can fake your way through most of it. And everyone looking has no clue if you're a moron or a genius.
It's the same thing that I sometimes mention is when I bring my car into the garage or to the mechanic, I don't know nothing about the engine. So I trust that what you're telling me is the truth. So that's why I'm coming to you and be like, okay, well, if you say so, I guess it's that way. And what so many things that you're saying resonate with me, because when I got exposed to kettlebells, the first thing that I saw was, I think that was 2010, 2011-ish. First time being exposed to somebody doing a swing, and I was like, ooh, what was that? And then finding my way with Pavel and Steve and stuff, and gravitating a little bit towards Steve Carter's side, because even though I think Pavel did a lot of good for kettlebells in the Western Hemisphere, I wasn't that attracted to this idea of I'm the Russian, blah, blah, blah. So I kind of gravitated towards, and the funny thing, it wasn't even Pavel, it was the German version of RKC, I think, because the RKC German version was we are the strongest, everything else is wrong, and there was just, I don't know if it was their intent, but it certainly had that impact on me. So that was
that does, look, let's be honest, that does follow with the marketing from the States. It's not like that doesn't sound to me like, oh, they just decided that's how they were going to brand it.
See.
I mean, look at the RKC and look at also even what Pavel's doing now with Strong First, right? It's cargo pants, black t-shirts, everything is super right, and it's fine. They doing the same thing. He's doing the same thing he did with the RKC, and obviously that marketing works, and it attracts a certain type of person. right? It, you know, to me, it attracts like a certain demographic that kind of buys into that. This is the gold standard, you know, ultimate in strength kind of thing.
That's why. Okay, so then the marketing was on par, and that was probably the
To
reason
me,
why.
I'm
Yeah,
giving you my opinion. I mean,
I mean,
to me, that
one of the
sounds to me
OGs.
like
Yeah.
the American marketing, right?
So that was the reason why I gravitated towards Steve. And when Steve taught us, you know, long cycle, snatch, clean, and hand-to-hand swing, and all that kind of stuff. That's why I came up with this idea that just like you, I consider Steve as a hybrid, somebody who was exposed to this hardstyle ideology, then was like, okay, let's go to the motherland, and now putting it together in a certain kind of way. And then when I started working with that stuff, because I was so brand new and putting stuff out, everybody was critiquing me to the hardest level, until I found out that folks who are kind of gravitating toward the Russian style of things a little bit, I mean, the Russian style, the kettlebell sport, good voice sport, right? Then I was like, okay, wow, everybody's always about the lower back and how you're supposed to rack the kettlebell and blah, 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 blah. So I kind of got the idea, wow, why is everybody so mad? And then that led to me being entrenched into kettlebell sport, be like, well, that's the truth.
Right.
Then I talked to Luca from Hardstyle Kettlebell Pro, who opened up my vision. Then when I found out the Turkish get up and all that kind of stuff, it's not something that the Russians do. That's something that Steve, or not with kettlebells in that regard, as far as I'm aware of, but Steve Maxwell brought it into the RKC curriculum right back then. So that there is something to it, but the hardstyle marketing is most definitely, that's probably the first thing that you bump into when you hear about kettlebells, right?
And I think, you know, for people listening, the thing that I try to share at my seminars with everyone is, look, the kettlebell is a tool. And as a tool, don't get sucked into marketing and don't get emotional about a tool. If it was a screwdriver and it was a Phillips head screwdriver and you didn't have a Phillips head screw, would you be like, oh no, we're going to work it out? I don't care what the screw is. No, you'd be like, oh, well, that's not the right tool for the job.
That's what's up. What's up. Yeah.
I mean, get another one and hey, look, the screw turns. I'm happy. Good day. All right. Now I can go do other things with my life. It's the same thing with the kettlebell. High volume. All right. I don't call it kettlebell sport because, and I also don't call hardstyle because I don't believe anyways, there's such a thing as styles in kettlebell. I think that's marketing and it's nonsense. So I don't think there's any such thing as hardstyle, to be honest with you. I think there is high tension. There is high tension and there is high volume, because that ultimately is what everything boils down to, what we're talking about, right? Because look, if we were talking about other types of weightlifting, I don't know if you have experience with like Olympic lifts or something, right? Olympic weightlifting, if you have two hands, a torso, hips, and feet, there's an efficient way to move the bar, and then there isn't. There's no such thing as styles in Olympic weightlifting. You can talk about styles when it comes to programming, like Bulgarians versus Russian. And you can have one group that uses more supplementals, or you can have one group that says, hey, you want to get strong? Do the lift more. How do I get better at squat? Lift. How do I get better at snatch? Snatch more, you know, dream about snatch, right? That's how you get better.
Wake up in the morning and snatch.
There's no style. No one ever walked into a weightlifting gym and said, hey man, what are you up? I'm going to do Lithuanian cleans today. And, but I'm going to jerk Latvian. Yeah. You Latvian jerk? I don't Latvian jerk. I'm from the Romanian style.
Even though we could say a Romanian deadlift right here.
Yeah, but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
most definitely.
Nobody's competing in those things with like this notion, right? There is a way to move a weight efficiently towards your given goal. So I'll tell you another thing that I explain at certs. Look, and this will represent easily on camera. This is the population of the earth, okay? This is everyone in the earth. You can see my fingers. Okay. Now, stop me when I get close to the amount of people that exercise 3 times a week or more consistently.
Keep going.
I don't mean
keep going.
Yeah, I don't mean I mean for years.
Yeah,
right?
keep going. Almost.
Yeah, look, I can get a beard hair in there, right?
Yes,
okay. Now,
definitely.
in this very tiny group, very small group relative to the world population, do you know what their number one pastime is when they're not training? It's going online and telling other people in this very small group that they're doing it wrong.
I love it, man.
A bunch of, right? Okay.
Love it.
This is ridiculous. So for me and for my students, what I teach is this. You want to know what's right and wrong in fitness? I'll tell you right now what's how you figure out right and wrong. One, is it safe? First thing, is it safe? Do no harm. I don't want to hurt people with what I'm teaching them. And also, I don't want to get hurt while I'm training. Is it safe? Number two, does it move you in the direction you want to go? This has nothing to do with style. I'm not talking about style. I'm not talking about hard style. I'm not talking whether you like cargo pants and black shirts, whether you, nothing. Does it move you in the direction you want to go, and is it safe? So look, you come into my gym and you tell me, I'm very flexible. I've always been very flexible. I do a lot of yoga, but my back's been hurting a lot. My teacher says I don't know how to brace properly. I can't get tight. I can't stabilize. Interesting. Okay. You know what? Could be some good stuff there. Maybe we should do a hard style, high tension swing. I'm going to start you with high tension swings. This is cool. This is going to be good. This is going to help you to brace. This is going to be a fun way for you to move. You know what? Windmills too. I want to do windmills with you, right? You know, you're very flexible shoulders, but let's see if you can stabilize, right? Some loaded stretches. Very cool. Okay. That's nothing to do with whether I like a style, whether I like marketing, whether I like this person's face. Who cares? That's a good tool for that job. On the other hand, you get somebody into my gym. He's walking around. He looks like he has 2 suitcases, doesn't know where to put them, right? He's like, stiff. I go, what have you been doing? He's like, CrossFit. I've been doing Olympic lifts. I'm working on my gymnastic. I'm like, okay, stabilize the midline, stabilize the midline, stabilize the midline, right? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. So everything you do is learning how to get tight and stabilize the midline. He goes, yeah. I go, cool. This is good. These are valuable things. But this guy's got no grace.
Yeah,
he has no ability to understand selective tension, right? He doesn't know how to relax. He doesn't know this kind of stuff. So I'm like, you know what? If I teach him high tension techniques or hard style techniques, does that fill a void in his training? Does it? And you be honest with yourself. Am I not just giving this guy more of the same stuff? So if he's coming to me and I say, what's your goal? And he says, well, I want to be more of a generalist. I want to be good at this and that. And okay, so giving you more of the same is completely and utterly a waste of time for you. So it's not the right thing. And what happens when you believe in these camps and in these styles is you have to put on blinders and believe some sort of dogmatic nonsense. And I don't care which style it is, because you can be the person who's a kettlebell sport person and completely blind and doesn't want to see anything else and say, that's not a swing. That's not how they do it in Russia. Or you can be the opposite. You can be a hard style person going, no, this is everything. It's all about strength and power. And it's like, man, come on.
It's that idea that I did a video about it recently, where I said, what is better, the barbell, the kettlebell, or the dumbbell? Well, let me ask you this. What is better, the knife, the spoon, or the fork?
Yeah, depends on what we're having.
Yeah, right? It's the different tools for different jobs, right?
Right. And understand that we're not on a desert island. I didn't just fall off a boat, right? And I'm not grasping for one thing, the only thing I'm going to be allowed to have, right?
Yeah.
So most people, when they walk into gyms nowadays, we have access to a lot of different equipment. We have access to different types of training modalities. So for me, again, what's the main thing? I'm looking at a piece of equipment and I'm asking myself, does it belong in my gym? Well, does it fill a void? Okay, yes. Can the kettlebell snatch is amazing. It's a great exercise, right? Barbell snatch can be a great exercise.
Powerful.
But they're very different things.
Yeah.
And I think where people get into trouble is where they start believing kind of fantasies and marketing, and they use a tool in a way that maybe it's not intended for. Look, you can wear thigh-high socks and booty shorts and cover yourself in chalk and try to make a barbell snatch a cyclical exercise. It's not. The ending of the barbell snatch is you drop it on the floor. That means it is not well suited for high endurance activities because it's not cyclical. And then you can say, yeah, but there's no but. It's not cyclical. A cyclical exercise is the ending of one repetition is the beginning of the next repetition. That's why when you look at strength endurance activities like running, cycling, swimming, you see that. So it makes sense.
Yeah.
When you look at the kettlebell snatch, it's cyclical.
Yeah.
That's why it's a strength endurance thing.
Yeah.
That's why the Russian approach, the high volume approach, makes perfect sense for that tool. You look at some people when they do kettlebell snatch and it's high tension, and you have to ask yourself, look, honestly, does that make sense? It's ending is the beginning of the next rep, but you're throwing more tension in the exercise than needs to be. So if there's more tension in the exercise than needs to be, that's actually just inefficient. What is your goal? And then if you say, well, my goal is to, in 5 minutes, do 100 reps, isn't there an easier way to do 100 reps in 5 minutes with less tension?
Is there a more efficient way? Yeah,
Yes.
I talked to Paul McElroy from Ireland, who was one of the first RKC instructors in Ireland, and he said the same thing.
Well, it's true. And look, it's not, and like somebody will hear this and shake their head like you are, somebody will hear this and get annoyed, and that's fine too. I mean, whatever. At the end of the day, everyone does what they want to do. But if I tell you, look, I swim across the pool, and I'll back up a bit for the visual. This is how I swim. Okay? And then you say, Shawn, listen, I don't want to offend you. I've heard good things about you as a human being. I've heard some not good things about you. Hard to know what's true. And you seem to know stuff about kettlebell, but look, between you and me, your swimming is not very good. It's not efficient, okay? I would like you to meet my friends, very good swim instructors. I said, no. Listen, I want you to understand. When I swim, it's very hard. It's very hard. So that's amazing for me. I'm doing incredible training. And then you say, well, creating inefficient movement, doing something inefficiently and calling it hard doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do, right? The ceiling you can hit is much lower moving inefficiently. And in general, we always want to practice that efficiency. We want to become attuned to it. We want to, understand that the more we move with efficiency, the higher we raise the bar for what's possible, right? There's a reason when people snatch a barbell, they snatch very close to the body, right? That's the most efficient path.
The most efficient way, yeah.
So why would you try to snatch the barbell out far? Just because it's hard, to make it harder for yourself? So on the other hand, when we look at something like the kettlebell snatch, we say, wow, that's so well suited for high volume, so well suited to be done the classic way that it is done. But then you can look at other exercises and be just as equally excited about the tension, because the tension is good. It's not a bad thing. Tension in a press is what's needed. You have to get tight and learn to come up, get the whole body engaged, and do a Turkish get up. The tension is great.
I just wanted to ask you, what kind of exercises do you think require or are suited for high tension? And I was just thinking about it.
These are great.
Yeah,
and you know what? I'll be honest.
Windmill.
Yeah, you see, when you do these things and you train it in such a way, like when I presented at courses, I'm presenting high volume and high tension in the same course. The same certification, I teach both. And the reason I teach both is because they're two sides of the same coin. When there's no marketing nonsense involved, why wouldn't you understand both? I want you to know how to stabilize the midpoint. We call it the midline. We call it the 3-point stack. Okay, you have all 3 points of your spine aligned.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
So that you want to learn how to control that. That's home base, and you want to learn how to get very tight, and you want to learn how to develop strength. There's no question about how valuable these things are. Then we also want selective tension, because the truth is, when you look at sport, I mean, really look at sport, a lot of people will look and they will say, well, the high tension stuff is the best for sports. Really? Is it? It's important to know how to get tight. It's important to be explosive. It's important to be strong. But selective tension is an incredibly athletic attribute to develop, because look at boxers. Anyone who's ever boxed or gone into a boxing gym, who are the easiest people to beat? Muscle-bound, stiff, tight people who don't understand selective tension. They can't be loose and relaxed and then explode, right? They're stiff. Who are the easiest wrestlers to play with? Same thing. When you're grappling with someone who's just all stiff, all they are is tension, 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 you can eat them alive. The worst person to grapple with, it feels like you're wrestling with an empty jacket. Everything is turned off except for when it needs to be turned on. And you are not going to learn that by just standing there and constantly doing this. It's a nice demonstration. It's a nice, thing that gets people excited, and it's a useful thing at the right moment, but it is not the be all end all of anything. You need both. When Sarah Claire Lajeunesse, she's the director for the Joint Mobility and Movement Program in Agatsu. When she teaches flexibility, she tells everyone flexibility training is strength training. And good strength training requires flexibility training. It's the same thing. You separate it for marketing and for nonsense. But in reality, it's the same. If
I
you're
was, yeah.
very flexible,
Wow.
but have no strength at the end ranges, you have what's called useless flexibility. If you are very strong, but have no flexibility, that you can barely move in and out of positions, you have useless strength.
I was
So
just, wow.
it's not separate.
I was just thinking about this as I was reading a post where somebody was mentioning, because, I think there's some great stuff where people just need some basic exercises to open up their thoracic spine, their shoulders, the hips, the tight, when they sit
Yeah.
all day. I get this. Yet, even from my own experience, I experienced I started with typical bodybuilding type of training. But when I engaged with kettlebells, I experienced and observed my flexibility go through the roof. And I did not specifically engage in any type of specifically designed mobility exercises. I was just training with kettlebells. And I read an article about an awesome coach who was talking about this, scientifically based. He said, well, science says, like what you said, you want to increase your flexibility, mobility, to train, use weights, because that's what actually mobilizes your body. Yet my question would be, if we could just be on that point a little bit.
Yeah.
Where do you think is the line? Some people need some specific mobility exercises, or it's like, nah, just start lifting and you'll get better.
No, I think things move, and things are very specific to individuals, right? I think where we get into trouble is we have these weird dogmatic thoughts, and sometimes we find studies that back up our thoughts. I mean, if you look hard enough, you'll find a study that backs up anything you want to dogmatically believe. The truth is, it's always the mix, and you need that big toolbox, right? Like, look, dynamic flexibility. People will say, oh, I only stretch dynamically because that's how you actually move. That's when you need your flexibility. Yeah, you know what? There's some really great stuff comes out of passive flexibility training too. Like you can't say it's one thing or it's this at the expense of this. Really, to really progress in things, you have to have an open mind. And it's very difficult because we come at it with bias, and the more we train and the more we're exposed to, we have bias, right? It can't be avoided. The only thing we can do is we can accept that we have them, and we can play little games with ourselves so that we don't become a victim of our own bias. I'll tell you the game that I play with myself, because of course I have bias. You can hear right away I have all these opinions, and unfortunately I sometimes forget to shut my mouth and I say too much. So I'll probably eat
just keep going.
I'll eat a ton of crap after this interview, but it's okay. I'm used to people telling me I'm an idiot and anything else they want. So that's fine. I can live with it. But this is a game that I play. So I'm in a jiu-jitsu class one day, and I'm doing the class, and my girlfriend's with me, and the class finishes. She looks at me and she goes, "Oh, you hated that." And I go, "I didn't say anything." And she goes, "Oh no, you think that guy's an idiot." And I was like, "Ooh, was it obvious?" And she goes, no, I don't think to anyone who doesn't know you, but to me it was obvious that you think he's an idiot." And I go, "Well, you're right, I do think he's an idiot, and that was some horrible jiu-jitsu." But I go, "That's not very good that you could see it on my face." And then I also thought to myself, well, that's pretty bad, because I didn't give the guy a fair shake. I didn't really listen, because obviously as soon as he started talking, I was like, oh, this is BS. This is stupid. These are bad moves. So I decided I'm going to play a new game with myself, and especially if I go back to that guy's class. And the game is shut up. We'll discuss it in the car. And that's a game I play with myself now whenever I go learn from someone. So if I go and somebody's giving a class, could be jiu-jitsu, could be anything. As soon as I have a thought in my head that starts to sound like my bias coming up, right? Like I'm watching a guy show a move and I'm thinking, yeah, that's a stupid move. You'd only get that on a guy who's drunk, Yeah. And has never trained a day in his life. And maybe you've already punched him in the head 15 times. So as soon as I start telling myself jokes about how dumb this is, I then tell myself, shut up, we'll discuss it in the car. Now, once I've said that, I'm not allowed to have any more thoughts about it, negative or positive. All I'm going to do is I'm going to focus very intently on listening to every word this person says. I'm going to try my absolute hardest to practice the technique exactly the way that they are explaining it, with no thoughts pro or con or anything about it. Nothing. I'm just going to practice, see if I've got it, see if I've understood what they've said. When I get to the car, as soon as my hands touch my steering wheel, then I'm allowed to go, whoa, that was like an hour I'll never get back from my life. Oh, unbelievable. I should have stayed home and banged my head with the door. I would have had a way better time, you know? Or, yes. And this has sometimes happened, I've gone through the class, touched the steering wheel, thought to myself, that was not as bad as I thought. And then I'll be like, you know, half of that sounded kind of meh, but I really did like this. I like this and this. That's interesting. And you know what? Since I like this and this, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm not getting something and seeing something about these other things that the guy showed, because man, he seems really good about these 2 points. So that could be me. I could be wrong. I'm going to leave the door open on that. Or maybe he was just real cool. I think he's spot on with this stuff, and maybe he's a little bit off with the other, but I'm going to leave a little bit of that door open for the fact that I could be missing out. And I think that's super important, that we have to do that. We have to leave, you know, even if you're experiencing something, you have to leave that door open. And I mean, look, why did I get on a plane and go to Russia and go learn from different guys? I wanted to hear other people's opinions about things. And some stuff I left with, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do it like this now. And some stuff I was like, no, that's not going to help the way that I want it to help. Because I always ask myself the same thing. What's going to help most of the people most of the time? Now, there may be a lot of different ways to do something, but again, what's most of the people most of the time? Okay, I'm going to show that to people and then help them understand the variance. And if they go off and they choose like an orientation of an arm slightly different, or this is slightly different, that's okay. My goal is to show what can help most of the people most of the time. And you got to be open, and it's very difficult. It takes a tremendous amount of work not to close your mind to listening to some other things, and not to just get entrenched in your camp.
And
right?
you're saying this, take the good and leave the bad.
Yes.
Mentality.
And also be open to the fact that,
and be open to, and let me ask you this. I just a couple of days ago I was talking to Dan John, and I've had Dan John on so many times, and I love his approach. I consider him a mentor. I consider him such an awesome human being. It's like the 5th time we get together, and I'm like a sponge when I listen to him. So at the same time, I had Bill Esch on, right? And he was talking about how he was mentioning some ideas from David Weck. So I was just asking, not specific questions, but I was asking Dan John. And so I'm asking you, because you've had this experience with that new thing, that cannonball thing back in the day, and you're buying all that stuff, right? And boom, here you go. Do you think in today's day and age that we live in, with all this knowledge that we have been able to gather and attain from all different areas and perspectives, do you think we should stay open to new ideas, or do you think, listen, the basics have been working for thousands of years, let's stick to them? And let me preface this one. Dan John said something so awesome. He said, well, you know, if you would have asked me this question 15 years ago, I would have said, yeah, let's tinker with it, let's think about it. Now I'm like, nah. And he says, because people, and I love this, because people are focusing on the 1% instead of focusing on the 99% that actually works. So what's your take? Should we stay open-minded and tinker with stuff, or be like, nah, man, basics, that's what's up?
Well, it's a bit, I love the question, and it's a bit tough because one, I want to stay open-minded, because what if you have a new take on something that's very powerful and that helps the fundamental, right? Because everything is the fundamentals at the end of the day, you know? Like, I'll try and give you an example also without offending everybody that might do the thing that I'm talking about, okay? Because, and not that I super care, but
I love it, man.
But look,
I love it.
There are some people that like to take very light kettlebells and do modern interpretive dance. Oh, look, I already offended everybody. Sorry. Okay.
Modern interpretive dance.
Well, that's what it looks like they're doing. They take very light bells and they dance around with them. And to be honest with you, really, okay, whatever.
If you want to do it,
it doesn't change my life in any way. Okay. So if you like to do that, cool. But whenever I look at something, I ask myself, if I'm doing that, what am I not doing instead? Because time is limited, right? And if it brings you joy, do it. If it's
Yeah.
fun, do it. If it
Yeah.
gets you moving, do it.
Yeah.
And all that is true. I
Yeah.
really do
Yeah.
believe that.
Me too.
But sometimes people will say like, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing it to get to this goal. And I go, well, I don't know if that's the way to get to your goal. And look, man, you only have an hour to train. So let's get the most out of the hour. And what have I seen get the most out of the hour for everyone since I'm a kid in anything? It's fundamentals. And the fundamentals haven't changed. So in that real sense, I'm 100% in agreement. Is fundamentals. Stay with the fundamentals. And a lot of people try to jump the fundamentals to advance because they're like, oh, I'm very interested in this and this looks so cool. And you do this move and you jump back and you put your foot here and then you, right? And it's like, okay. And there may be something to that move that could be good, but you don't even have a base yet. You have no foundation in the thing yet. And you're trying to do some moves that maybe aren't going to be as valuable as you think. The things that are the bread and butter have never stopped being the bread and butter moves. And that's not just for kettlebell, that's for everything. I mean,
Life in general. Yeah.
there's a life and everything is fundamentals. And you know what? The key though is to be open to knowing, even if your fundamentals are wrong. What if your fundamentals are wrong? Are you really willing to change and relearn all your fundamentals? That's a tremendous amount of work. What if you spent a lifetime learning fundamentals only to find out they weren't the fundamentals? What would happen? Do you know what a nightmare that is? This happened to me actually.
Wow.
I had been doing jujitsu since before there was jujitsu in Canada, right? So I had to go to the States. I had to travel to learn jujitsu. There was no Brazilian jujitsu when I first started. All right. And I trained and I learned with a lot of guys who, to be honest, were very good. They're very good guys. And a few years ago, it was like 4 or 5 years ago, I saw this guy, you know, he had an ad out. He was a Rickson Gracie black belt, one of the first ones. And for those of you who don't know jiu-jitsu, Rickson is the man. Okay. So this was one of his black belts. This was before Rickson put out any videos. Okay. And I'm like, whoo, so this guy's a black belt under Rickson. I want to see like some of Rickson's stuff, right? I'll check it out. I bought one of his online packages. I look at the videos. I think to myself, this guy's a moron. Everything he's saying is wrong.
Wow.
It's completely wrong. His fundamentals are all screwed up based on what I thought was right in terms of fundamentals from what I had been taught. But I figured, well, look, I bought this online package. I might as well, like, the money's gone.
And you're not able to sit in the car and shut up. So you're at home.
I can't sit. I'm sitting in my house. So I'm like, this guy's an idiot. Whatever. Okay. But I said, you know what? I'm going to try a couple of these things and I'm going to do it in earnest. I'm going to really watch the videos. I'm going to try and understand what the guy's saying. I'm going to attempt to do what he's talking about. So I watch it. I go to a club. I get to roll with some of the black belts. I catch them right away. I tap out a bunch of the black belts doing what this guy said to do. Now I got a big problem. I was both
you applied what you learned in that course and you tapped the guys at the club. Yeah,
easily. And they were even shocked. They were like, what did you do? They were like, I nailed them with fundamentals. I nailed them with very basic things. One of the guys even, he made a face and I thought I had heard him. And I go, you okay? And he goes, yeah, I'm fine. Because I don't remember the last time someone submitted me with that from that position. The guy probably hadn't been caught in that in 8 years, right?
Fundamentals that you have practiced before you even watched that.
But I did the fundamentals differently because that's what he was showing on the tape. So now I had a major problem. I was freaking out because I'm like, if this guy was right and I thought he was so wrong, I might be wrong about everything in jiu-jitsu. So what am I going to do? I can either go home and pretend that didn't happen, or I have to go home and start questioning everything that I think I know, which is a horrible thought. I literally went home and told my girlfriend, I said, yeah, we have to go to California. And she was like, what? I mean, not that she was opposed to the idea of a trip to California, but I'm like, we have to get to California like as fast as we can because I thought this guy was wrong. And I think he might be right about everything, which means I might be wrong. So I sent him a message. His name is Henry Akins. I sent him a message like, hey, Henry, I'm going to come to California. I'd love to train with you. Can I do a private? And he was like, yeah, no problem. You can come to the class also, do a class, and then we'll do a private. I'm like, great. Fly down to California, go train with him, blew my mind during the class. And then we do the private. I was sitting there shaking my head. I'm like, Henry, how do I not know this? How these are white belt things you're teaching me. And you're saying almost the opposite of everything I've been taught. How is this possible? And he just looked at me and he just smiled. And now like I've been training with Henry for years now. So I've seen other people have this experience. So I know that smile when he just smiles and he's like, broken telephone.
But why do you think that is? That people are, you have been exposed to these fundamentals. They were taught to you by people that you're saying they're actually good guys. And how can you get? That's just like doing
It's
this.
a little diluted. Gets a little diluted every generation, depending on how it was handed down. Some things were handed down. Like jiu-jitsu is a good example because, especially at the beginning, people kept secrets. People kept a lot of secrets. Right? It may be hard for people doing jiu-jitsu now to understand this, but when it first kind of like started to come to North America, the Brazilians would show one thing to kind of everybody, and then they would show like another thing to the Brazilians. It was almost like there was two sets of books. And if you were kind of fortunate enough that you were really on the inside, you were getting one kind of lesson. And then you think you have guys that come up in that, and certain things are held back, right? And then they end up having a school of their own. And they're good. They're athletic. They're good. They have some good stuff, but they're not quite what their teacher was. And then you get a few more generations of that and a few more generations of that until you end up with stuff that's kind of too far removed from the source. Wow. It's really a pale copy of it.
Yet it's still recognizable as a fundamental to the naked eye, but somebody who's more into it,
it's missing details.
And these details are so massive that the difference is huge.
Yeah. Well, look, take the snatch, for example, the kettlebell snatch, right?
Yeah.
You try to imagine without the things that you already have in your head that you understand and then But if I'm in a class and it's a fitness class and people are there and they're training and they're fit and they see the kettlebell go to the backswing, it goes through the acceleration pull, it goes to fixation, right? They pick up on a lot of things, even get the insert. They get a lot of, let's say, good stuff. They pick up on the breathing. But if I don't explain to them the shifting of weight. And they may not see it if it's subtle. Like some guys do it, it's very exaggerated. Some guys do it, it's subtle. Okay, now you train with a guy for a long time. You pick up the fundamentals of breathing and he tells you 3 breaths per rep. And you're like, oh, I've never seen that. And you're like, well, it's a good way to do it because you keep a cadence, you keep the heart rate down. It's 3 exhales. Really, exhales? I was taught sharpen through the nose. No, you can do it like that. Okay, cool. So you walk away with that. But you never learned that there's kind of a spiral to it. You never learned that you're loading and biasing to one side, counterbalancing, gliding. You were never taught that. Okay. Now you're a super fit person. You look really good. You got nice abs, and you have a piece of it. And now you train a bunch of people. And
I get it.
You see? And so a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more until eventually it's got pieces of the fundamentals. But it's nowhere near as sharp.
And the funny thing is I call this the Matrix move. Like Neo dodging bullets. That's what I call on the ascending as well as the descending phase to shift the center of mass, right? And wow, that's so you take certain pieces of it, but you hide that very crucial piece,
right?
Which, from a professional's perspective is still a detail. And then you let them run with it. And then as they teach and as they cert other people, it goes down and down and down and down until they meet you.
And that's why you don't, good teachers don't do it. Good teacher gives everything that they have in the hopes that their student will be sharper than them, not the opposite. And this should be in everything. You should hope that your students don't need you anymore. That's a sign of a good teacher. If you've given them so much that there's no reason for them to be around, but they still are, you did a good job.
I love it.
I say the same.
I say the same thing. I say the same thing. Just to reiterate, I say the same thing. I'm always like, a good system works when the expert leaves the room.
Yes, my job is to render myself useless.
Oh, I love it, man. I say the same thing.
Become absolutely and utterly.
You don't need me anymore. You just come for fun. That's the idea.
You like hanging around with me because you like my jokes and I'm a fun training partner. But if you need me because you can't do this without me, then I haven't done a good job explaining it to you, at all. And you see the opposite in marketing. It's always, that's how you know if you're with a teacher or a guru. The guru places himself in his, and I don't mean in the yogic term, because then it has a positive connotation. I just mean in the more obnoxious North American term. But the guru wants you to believe that you need them because somehow they're the holder of the truth, right? They hold the truth, and your only access to the truth is through them. where a good teacher is just someone like you who's a student who has got more experience, they've
Yeah.
further down the road, and they can just kind of yell back to you, hey, watch out for that tree and that log's not so safe. That's it.
That's
That's
what's
I'm further down the difference between my kettlebell snatch and my students' kettlebell snatches. I've done it more and I've spent more time thinking about it. So hey, you can ask me questions and I can speak
I
from
love it.
experience.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
other than that, there's no difference between the two of us, you know, in anything that you're teaching, the teacher is you. It's the same thing. It's just, man, they got some more experience. So, you know, they can help you move along a little bit faster and you don't have to make the mistakes that they made. So hopefully you're going to get to where they are
Love
much
it.
quicker, you know,
Wow.
that's it.
If I might just pivot back a little bit
Mhm.
for a couple of minutes to your origin story, because what really makes me think, or my question is, why did you choose to say, listen, I got the RKC, interesting. I got the kettlebells, interesting, but I gotta go to the motherland of kettlebells and see what's up, because in my mind it could have also went that way. Well, they said it's the Russian way, no need for me to go look.
Yeah.
But what piqued your curiosity and your interest to be like, hey, no, I gotta see what's up?
Yeah, there started after a while, like clips started to come out. You started to see Russians doing things, right? I mean, the internet was an interesting thing. You started to get like a little bit of a peek into,
Yeah.
That doesn't quite look like what we're doing. Like, I know we got a
Yeah.
story, but something doesn't quite match with the story. And you know what? Honestly, it was just as weird as the beginning of my story, because I literally was in my place one night and I was thinking, and I saw something come up online, and it was an event that was going to happen in Russia. There was going to be some training, and I'm like, I'm going to Russia. That was like the first, even before it was like a conscious thing. I was just like going to Russia. Yeah, going to Russia. I'm going to go train, you know? And it was funny because when I got there, Steve was there. The guys from the, what's it called? Orange County Kettlebell Club were there. And
Where
yeah, so
Dennis is now? Yeah, where Dennis is,
yeah,
is a
yeah.
head coach. Yeah.
Yeah, where Dennis is, yeah.
Yeah.
So like all these guys were showing up
And
there, right? And it was just
who's
funny
that guy
'cause-
from? Oh, I gotta talk to these guys, man.
Yeah,
Orange
so
County.
it was funny because like everybody was already like everyone had kind of simultaneously the same idea. Steve turned around and saw me and he was like, "Oh, hello, Mozen," you know, and I was like, "Hello." I guess we both had the same
Ah,
idea.
you didn't be like, hey guys, let's go to Russia.
No, everyone just kind of simultaneously showed up and we were all looking at each other. Well, look, at the same time, I like Steve. Steve and I are friends. I was just on his Instagram not long ago, and I'm not just saying it. I consider Steve a friend, and I really do like him. You know, especially he's one of those guys, like since that day we stayed friends, but we also have competed around the world trying to, you know, do the same thing and
Yeah.
make money and
Well,
teach in
that's
the
what's
same
up.
places.
Yeah.
And sometimes he's stuck it to me good, and I hope I've stuck it to him as well.
Love it.
But
Friendly
we've always done it-
competition. Yeah.
Yes, but we've always done it as gentlemen.
Yeah.
And I've never pretended he doesn't exist. He's never pretended I don't exist. And in fact, people have shown up to my seminars and I've asked them as like, oh, you've trained before? And they go, yes, I've done, you know, the IKFF certification. And I go, oh, cool. My friend Steve. And they were like, yeah. And I said, that's good. So what brings you here? And they were like, well, I asked Steve what other certs I should take. And he said, you.
Awesome.
And I was like, oh, right on. Very cool.
Awesome.
And I've done the same thing for him too. People ask me, they're like, okay, well, I've trained with you. Who should I go train with? I'm like, I would go check out Steve, you know? And so that's always happened over the years. But yeah, look, at the same time, it's like, hey, maybe I'll go to Russia, I'll go train, it'll be cool. And, you know, and then like, that's why also when he turned around and saw me, you know, I think his thoughts were like, oh, Mozen's here. And I was like, that's right.
Oh no.
You know? And I'm like, all right, well, let's party. It's going to be fun, you know? But that's the thing. And I'm always like that. I'm always trying to be open to learning. And, you know, like I said, I went there. I thought it was very funny because there were a lot of experts in the room and they often argued with each other, which was hysterical to me.
Really? At that event?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
At the Russian event, people are fighting each other like that?
Constantly like arguing and everything else. I mean,
No, that's not true. That's not true what he's saying.
well, like one guy would get up and speak. and sometimes through a translator or not, because they could speak, and a couple of them could speak, but they sounded like they learned English through a instruction manual for a vacuum cleaner, and it was
Man,
very, very
hey,
funny.
you gotta do more videos for social, man.
It was a riot. Like there
love
were
it,
guys
man.
that would get up and talk, and I can't remember if I said it to Steve or someone else, but one guy was talking, and I mean what he was saying was really good, and he's obviously a very smart man and an incredible like athlete and everything, so nothing to take away from him. But look, this is not his first language, so when he was speaking, it was so boring, right? That he literally took years off my life. Like I could feel like, oh, I won't live to that age. Oh, that's it. That was that's the last year in the retirement home. That's gone. And he was talking about sine and cosine and doing like calculus and crap on the board. And I was just thinking to myself, I looked at the guy next to me and I go, whoo. And he goes, what? And I go, I'm still going to have a job when these guys get to North America, because this is some boring shit. And the guy was just cracking up, and then we're trying not to get in trouble. But
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah,
very
yeah,
smart, but also
yeah.
unbelievably boring. So, but
Love
that's the
it.
thing is like, when you're looking at that, and those guys, one of them would get up and say something. It'd be like, you should do blah blah blah, and then they were like, now we'll have a demonstration. They had a demonstration, and it was like, excuse me, that guy just did the opposite of what you said, and there would be a little bit of. He would be better champion if he did my way. It's like, oh,
This is crazy. Yep.
okay. And I thought that was super funny. And you know what? I didn't care that they had differences of opinion, because I
Yeah.
knew there wasn't a Russian way. There was
There
an
we go.
approach towards
Yeah,
a
an
given
approach of
goal.
training. Yeah.
And there were some variants, as there are
As
in
there are.
different types of lifts. And they're all fairly close. But, like, look, a guy will rack this way. A guy will angle his hand this way because he wants the center of the sphere to be here, right over his elbow, right? So it's like, oh, I could see that, but I could also see why some people would find that super awkward and uncomfortable, and they might want to be here. So it was okay. I just wanted to understand, why are you making the choices you're making? And then what can I teach that will help the majority of people the majority of the time, right? And some of these guys were bigger guys. Some of them were smaller, so they make different choices. Some come up to meet the bells, some don't come up to meet the bells. I just want to hear why. Like,
Why?
tell me
Yeah.
why. And if I can understand why, I'll know what's going to help people given certain circumstances. So it's okay. You don't all have to agree. And I could also already see right from the beginning, frankly, that these guys were all going to go at each other's throats. And it wasn't going to take very long. They were making like a very nice fake uniform, like, oh, this is it. It's a collective. We are a collective, and we are all going to bring this information to the world. And I was thinking to myself, oh, you guys are going to shank each other like
After we're gone.
opportunity. And they absolutely
Each other.
did. They were like merciless. Like, yeah, some of them would send me each other's failed drug tests.
No, to make the other guy look bad.
Yeah. What's that?
Wow. To make the other
Yeah.
guy look bad, like, hey,
Oh yeah, they would send me, like, one guy sent me a form.
see, it's not true.
He
That's
sent me like
it
this
is.
medical form, and it's all in Russian, right?
What?
And I'm like, so I sent it to my friend. He translates it for me, and I go, "What's this?" And he goes, "It's a drug test. He goes, it's a failed drug test." So I
Okay.
went right back, "What do you want me to do with this?" And they were like, "I don't know. Maybe you want to."
Evaluate your decision if you want to invite this person to America.
Look, maybe this gets published somewhere for lots of people to see it.
You don't know.
It's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm just saying. No, like,
Wow.
that.
And you know what's funny? You know what's funny, Shawn? As these Russians get on their throats in front of the class, or trying to bite each other's ears off, we hear. I mean, I live in Switzerland, Europe, so maybe it's a little bit different. But on the internet, people go nuts when you say just constructive criticism about a coach or a person, not even attacking them, just saying like, listen, I love what you said there, because I say this as well. You said this dancing with lightweight kettlebells. I say the same. I say like, listen, if it makes you happy, and more importantly, if it keeps you moving, awesome. If that brought you to kettlebells, awesome. Now you want to find out what these things really can do, unless, using them as dumbbells, maybe you can go deeper. But we are so incredibly sensitive. We're like, oh, he said something about this person, that person, while the Russians be like killing each other
like,
on the podium.
And honestly, like for them, it's not like they were going crazy, especially that day. They were like, or that week, they were trying to be very like, hey, we're a team, you know, but it didn't last much longer after that event. It started to get fractured because, you know, listen, there's money involved. So people start acting crazy. But the truth is, you don't have to be like that. You can still like, look, like I said, like I know guys that, hey, we all do the same thing for a living. We're all trying to teach kettlebells. We're all trying to do this and that. But at the same time, we're not pretending we don't exist. I'm not pretending there's not other courses. And I have no problem to go on with Steve. Many years ago, I asked Steve, hey, man, you want to come in? I had an idea. I was like, hey, Steve, you know what'd be cool? Let's get everybody from that like graduating class at the RKC, all the ones that we kind of became well-known around the world. Let's get together and do like a big event and everybody can come train with us. And Steve laughed. We were on the phone and he laughed at me. He said, dude, listen, that's a fun idea. These guys are not like, this guy won't come and that guy with an ego is not gonna. He's like, you want to hang out and do something together, let's do it. So I had him come to Toronto and he taught a bit and I taught and it was like cool, you know, like you can be like that or you can approach this the other way, right? Because and a lot of groups do that. I mean, I met somebody, I won't say now the name of the group, but it's a well-known group. And, you know, I met this guy and he came up to me. He was like a senior instructor in that group. And he goes, I'm not supposed to talk to you.
For real.
And I'm like, oh, you've been giving your marching orders not to speak to me. And he said, yes. And he goes, now I'm very curious. Wow. I go, oh, so you were just moderately curious about me before, but now that you've been told not to speak to Shawn. I said, so what are we going to do about that? He goes, I guess we'll have to speak.
Love it.
And we ended up hanging out, and then because we were doing another training, he just happened to know somebody. I was training with somebody, and he was there helping out because we had a mutual teacher. And then we were hanging out at lunch, and we were having a good time. And he goes, now I know why I was told not to talk to you. And I go, oh yeah, and he goes, yes. He goes, because they knew I was going to enjoy it. So like, it's just so silly to me that, you know, anybody would think that. Like, I would rather have my students go check out, like, look, you could go train with Dennis Vasiliev, you know, you can train with like all these different guys. They have a lot of cool stuff to say.
Look at them.
Also, maybe you go train with one of these guys and it's a better fit for you than training with me.
Almost definitely. Maybe you connect. Maybe that's the vibe that these guys are sending off. It resonates more than with me. Go ahead.
Yeah. Then you found the right coach.
Yet at the same time, what I like what you say. Yet at the same time, always make sure you got your blinders, you know, to an extent where you can see that there's other things happening. I think that's such a crucial thing where people be asking me like, hey, should I take the strong first, sir, blah, blah, blah. And all that. Listen, I was even thinking about recently about doing the strong first because I so enjoyed having the sessions with Luca. Yep. And then once I got more deep into it, I was like, certain things don't, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, but for example, the snatch test doesn't resonate. I don't think the snatch test makes a lot of sense when we compare it with the ideas of what Pavel says, bring the kettlebell down, the talk test, blah, blah, blah. But then on the snatch test, you go ham. And then, well, snatch test should be then a more efficient way. I talked to Paul about this, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, listen, that's just my thing. But if you like it, and if you're like, well, I want to do it that way, go ahead and enjoy it. And I'm sure you're going to learn some stuff.
Yeah. That's the thing. Right. It's so weird. Like nowadays, like also people get so offended by everything except for the things they should actually be offended by, you know?
Oh, that's like, a deep one.
It's deep. Unbelievable to me. And it's like, the truth is like, I can have a difference of opinion with someone and still like and respect them.
Yeah. Oh, that's okay. Man. That's
like, and it seems like this has been lost. Like, look, I can tell like everything you just said about the snatch test and the way they approach the snatch. I agree. But I can sit here with someone and they can tell me, no, Shawn, you're wrong. And I can be like, okay, why? And they can tell me and I go, no, I don't think I'm wrong. And they can go, well, I do. And I can think, no. And then we can move on with our lives.
Yeah, we can move on.
And I actually can still like them. I can come in and give them a bro hug. You know, we can make it last for 10 seconds or it doesn't count, you know, like whatever. I'm still cool with it. It's like, but somehow everyone gets so crazy incensed. Like, what are you so incensed about it? We're talking about how we're moving a little cannonball up and down. Like, man, I like to do it this way. I think there's value in it. You like to do it that way. I'm like, cool, but that's not for me. Okay, let's move on with our lives. That's no problem. Yeah. And
So,
you know what? There's good stuff. There's good stuff in everything, but people get very entrenched in their camp because they spend
yeah,
time,
yeah,
they spend money,
money, yeah.
and when you put the time and the money and everything in it, and so, for some of them, it's their identity. It's like your identity becomes this
I
thing,
love it. Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
you have to guard that so much that if for a second, like what if for a second you think like, oh, maybe this isn't the perfect thing that I'm thinking it is, or it isn't the ultimate thing that I think it is, well, then somehow it's like it diminishes you. It doesn't diminish
It
you at all. It's
doesn't.
how you
No.
use a tool. It
It
has no impact on you as a human being. You're still a very nice person if you snatch this way or that way.
Yeah,
It's
doesn't
really
make a
irrelevant.
difference. Yet,
No.
you know, it doesn't take away from you as a person. It only adds,
Yeah.
because that's what even science is supposed to do. I had this. I'm just thinking about this term that I heard in a recent book. It's called, I think, institutionalized disconfirmation. So the idea is, I have a thesis, and in my courses, and when I talk to folks and talk to students, and when I coach, I'll be like, listen, I think I found something in, let's say, like the swing differences, right? I see some differences that I don't see that people are actually going, they are explaining it, but maybe I'm just explaining it in a different way. So here's my thesis. Yet, please be aware, it may be wrong. I just see it that way. And then sometimes people come up and they say something, I'm like, ooh, I didn't think of this.
Yes.
Wow, that adds to my knowledge.
Yeah.
It doesn't attack me on a person, because I cannot be omniscient, right?
No, no one can know all of this, you know, and have the ability to be correct about everything, right? So, you know, I say, look,
Oh.
this is what I do and where I've gotten doing what it is that I do. And, you know, you can come train with me and I'll explain to you, and I'll share with you. And hopefully that will get you further down the road towards what your goal is. And that's great. You know, it's a way. And again, one of the things that I'll sometimes tell people is like, you know, you can have contradictions and live with contradictions and still have great results. Two people can do the exact opposite thing and have a fantastic result. And the example I give is, look, you and I decide to climb a mountain. We get to the base, we're looking up, and you tell me, I'm going up the right side, this is perfect. And I go, you have no idea what you're talking about, my friend. This is suicide. I was here yesterday and I looked, and it is this side, this face, mint. Your way, completely ass backwards. Very, very bad idea. Very inefficient. And then some other guy shows up and he looks at both of us and he says, I never met two bigger idiots in my life. This is exactly where you go. I do this all the time. We all three of us, we start going up the mountain, right? I see you at the top. You're sitting there having a beer and you're like, I told you. And I'm like, I told you, look, it's perfect, right? The third guy died on the way up. So guess what? You and I did the exact opposite thing. We both were successful in our goal. We're both right, even though it was the opposite. The third guy who died on the way up, he's wrong. Okay? He was wrong. Poor bastard,
Well,
he's wrong. And he's arguably wrong because his way got himself killed. But we can still live with this dichotomy that we're doing something that's, you know, opposite opinion, but produces a good result.
And I had this experience when I was talking to Dan John, and Dan John is on a health and fitness level. He's against heavy Turkish get-ups because he says for most people it doesn't make sense to use very heavy weights. When it comes to performance,
people can barely pick up a pencil. So.
Yep. Yes. And so I was agreeing with him. I was like, yeah, you're right. So a couple of days later, I post a video where I'm almost missing a 40 kilogram Turkish get up with my left side, the weaker side. With my right side, I was able to pull it off. And then somebody be like, but didn't Dan John say that heavy Turkish get ups are bad? And this is what it is. It's like, yeah. And I started doing this. When people are mentioning something in the comments, I applaud them. I said like, yeah, you're right. Full stop. And then they'd be like, why are you doing it then?
Yeah.
Well, because I want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dan John's right. And maybe, you know, I've been doing this for a longer time. I have a little bit of experience. Maybe I wouldn't give a 40 kilogram Turkish kettlebell to somebody who just walks into the gym.
Of course.
No, and Dan John's right. But you can still do it.
You still wanted
That's
to do it. Look, getting
do it.
butt naked, drinking rum and playing congas on my roof is probably not a great idea in the winter.
Yeah, but you can
That
do it,
doesn't
man.
mean I'm not doing it this weekend, right?
Love it.
I mean, we've got to leave a little flexibility to do it just because we want to do it.
Just because. Doing it just
like,
because.
why did you do that? Because I wanted to do it. Because I wanted to see if I could, right? That's okay too.
Yeah.
Is a little bit too much of, like I said, like, well, didn't he say? Yes, he said that. And you can also agree with it. You can also be, yeah, by and large, I agree with that. And then why did you do it? Felt like doing it. That's okay. And again, just because you felt like doing that doesn't mean you're going to give a client, like somebody was once at a course asking me, hey, do you still teach the high pull as a way to like get into the snatch? And I said, no. And they're like, no, why not? And I said, well, it's not really the path you want for the belt for the snatch. So it's not you kind of do it and then you undo it. And I don't do that. And they were like, okay. A few seconds later, they caught me teaching this girl the high pull into the snatch. And he said, man, you just told me you don't do that. And I said, yes, usually. In this particular instance, at this moment, I knew it was a thing that would be very useful for her.
Wow.
So just because I don't do something most of the time doesn't mean it wasn't going to be helpful for someone right now, right? Like you have to have some flexibility. And when you have the experience to look at the situation and you sit back with your toolbox and you open it up and you go, I haven't used that in a while. That could be cool. Let's see if this fixes up this problem. You have to have that mental flexibility. People love, and we always joke in my company in Agatsu that I say our slogan, and it should just be on the t-shirts. It should just say, it depends. It's the worst marketing slogan in the history of marketing, in the history of mankind. But it is the answer I give most of the time. Somebody will say to me, like, oh yeah, you do kettlebells? And I'll be like, yeah. And they're like, I'm just getting into that. How do you do the breathing for kettlebells? And I'll go, oh, it depends.
It depends.
And they go, what do you mean? And I go, well, what's the exercise? What are you doing? Are you doing high tension? Are you doing high volume? It's like, it could be a sharp in through the nose and then a sharp out, kind of like boxing. Or it could be like just exhales. And they're like, how could that be? And I'm like, because it depends. And it's the same thing for everything. People ask me all kinds of things. I'm like, it depends, it depends, it depends. And it's like, the mind doesn't like that because it's not definitive, right? Everyone loves it when it's super simple and it's very definitive. That's why if you're a guru marketing your new BS thing, you come out with a blanket statement, no matter how ridiculous it is.
That's
right.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. No matter how stupid it is, you'll polarize your base, because half the people will hear the stupidity in what you said and they'll be like, this person's a moron. They don't even believe that, and they're gone. But the people that are left there, oh, they believe it. Which is like, oh yeah, I knew that was right.
Yeah, which in many cases is a huge chunk of people who are stuck with something that goes against the grain and be like, but what? And to a certain, and see, we could apply this it depends curiosity nuanced stuff exactly to this point. Well, but he says something that's completely off base, like your jiu-jitsu, and 50% people be like, that's stupid, I'm not listening, and be like, well, let's just give it a listen, even though it's stupid. And then maybe there's a small percentage that there may be actual truth in it, yet in today's, like you already mentioned, today's day and age that we live in, technology gives everybody a platform. And I talked to Paul McElroy. I said, the funny thing is when you start in fitness, I don't care if it's kettlebells, barbells, or bodybuilding, whatever you do. When you start, you are at the bottom of the pyramid, where it's east to west. Everybody has an opinion, and you hear it constantly. Well, everybody says something different. And as soon as you climb to the top, you be like, wow, here's actually some folks who say similar things. And that's what I always tell people. I'm like, listen, on the bottom, everybody says something different. Yet when you go to the top, you will hear similar ideas worded differently. You will also see differences, and maybe even people who don't agree with each other. Yeah. But it is minute.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. For sure. Yeah. And the only way that they got there is because and why it's so similar is because it has to be. It has to be at the end of the day, because the fundamentals are really the fundamentals. And you see it in everything. Look, in boxing, there's only so many ways to ball up a fist and hit someone efficiently, right? So you can have at the bottom of the pyramid an unbelievable amount of styles. But then when people actually put it together and really fight, it's got to be very close.
Yeah.
It's going to all be very, very similar because that's what it is. The truth is all very, very, very similar. The bottom stuff is the garnish. It's the parsley, you know, it's all that stuff and all that noise and static in between. But when it gets really right down to it, moving well and doing something,
Powerful.
it's
Yeah.
all going to be very, very close. And
That's-
like you said,
yeah.
and the nice thing is that we can express it differently. We can explain it differently. What I like to tell my students at the seminars, I go, look, I'm not smart enough to have made any of this up. I'm not that kind of a smart person, but I have particular ways that I explain things that are
Yeah.
my own.
Yeah.
And if that resonates with people and it makes things easier to understand and it helps you to get a little further along, then that's uniquely mine. But I didn't make any of these things up at all. You know, I'm just find ways to pass on what I know.
You find ways to, that's what I do as well. It was taught to me, and I think I'm trying to find ways to make it more applicable in a certain sense. And then, you know, as I was in my teaching career, I was, you know, picking everything apart, going into extensive details, realizing after all, well, there are people who are interested in the minute details, and then learning from Dan John, be like, you know, I use a type of idea, I call it Frankenstein's monster. First, I teach them the concept. If they understand it, boom, done. You don't need nothing more. You got it. Do it. Now do the reps. Second thing is drills. You don't understand it, let's go into the drill. And number 3, Frankenstein's monster. Maybe something wrong, maybe the ankle, and I love that. And he's like, maybe I gotta use some terms, you know, like biceps or pectoralis or stuff like this, right? But that's the stuff that he wants to avoid, because, hey man, you get the concept, you're safe with it. Yet there's also place for details. Right, and it depends.
Yeah, and it does depend. What I use when I'm trying, because at my courses we spend time not only obviously learning the techniques, learning how to teach the techniques, but learning how to speak about things.
Oh yeah.
And this is a part of the course. And one of the things that I teach is when I ask a question and people answer it, oftentimes they get the answer correct, but it's only correct because I know the answer. They haven't explained it in a way that would be meaningful to someone who is sitting around having a coffee and a biscotti. So that's what I call the coffee and biscotti rule. So when you explain something to me, it has to be meaningful. If I'm sitting in a cafe, I'm having a coffee and a biscotti, and I've never exercised a day in my life. So if I ask you to explain to me what a cyclical exercise is, and I have no idea, I've never done kettlebells, I've never done any kind of training, and one of the trainers explains it to me, but doesn't explain it the way that I think a person with no experience would understand, then they haven't explained it. And so that's what we practice at the course. How can you explain it? And look, after that, if you want to get into more detail and you want to get into more technical terms, that's fantastic. Great, no problem. And some people really geek out on that. That's cool. But more often than not, especially look, as a person who has spent all this time, like, because not only with kettlebells, but I started teaching at a young age. I spent most of my life standing in front of people saying things and then asking this question: does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I can tell you, almost everyone does this. Mm-hmm. And really, it's this: they don't understand what you said. So I assume that I will have to say it in the simplest possible way to get to the majority of the people in the room to understand it. And I have spent my life refining what I say so that it can be simply understood within a sentence or two, and that they could get the concept within a sentence or two.
Most definitely. It's that idea that you are trying to really break it down to a level where a kid can understand it, right?
Yes. And if you can't, then
and let me ask you this.
Probably have a room full of confused people.
Yeah, and let me ask you this on a final note.
Yeah.
2 things actually. The first question is, are there? And I asked Dan John this question, so I'm just asking you: are there room for highly complex programming or training systems that are, if you're not a incredibly advanced person with constant guidance of a coach, that do make sense? That do they make sense, or do you think even the complex of training modalities and not training programs and systems should be breaking down to where even an advanced lifter doesn't have to use his RAM up here and just keeps going? What's
For me, you know that expression, simplicity is genius.
Yeah.
I think this carries over and serves more people more of the time than the opposite. And so many people, they spend a tremendous amount of time dissecting the minutia of certain things. And look, for some things it's good, like we were saying, in the
Yeah.
fundamentals,
Yeah.
understanding, you know.
Yeah.
But in the programming, I've seen bad programming with really good results because of consistency of effort and applied
Wow.
mindfully, you know. And
Wow.
I've seen good programming go nowhere because of constant over tinkering and complexity to the point where it could not be applied properly.
Wow.
So
Wow. That's powerful.
and when we talk about the average person, what does the average person need? The average person needs consistency of effort on the fundamentals because they return the most for the time put in.
That's what's up,
So
man.
this is not overly complex, you know. Um, People that really are far and highly, what someone might consider like highly developed physically, or their attributes are exceptional or whatever, I tell you, the majority of them, it's not that they've mastered the complexity. You know what they are? They're masters of monotony.
Oh, I
They
love it.
can go
Mundane.
in and practice the fundamentals to a point that would drive a normal human being
Crazy.
insane.
Oh, I love this. Wow. And hey, I shared with, and I love it when that stuff resonates, when experts like you say the same thing. When I was talking to Dan and we were sharing back and forth about this idea of complex systems, and then I said something. I've heard a coach say, he was asked a question: what's the difference between a good athlete and a great athlete? And he said, well, the great athlete is the one that pushes through the boredom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, if you followed me around my gym and watched my training, it would not be as exciting as anyone I think it is. And I don't think I'm particularly good at anything, but if I am good at anything, is two small things that have served me very well. One, I believe I have a good handle on how to learn. I understand
Oh,
how to
yeah.
learn,
Yeah.
and I can learn anything. And I mean that, like, anything that I'm interested in, I seem to learn quicker than most because I understand the process for me. And the other thing is, I can sit there and do things that are required to learn the fundamentals that would drive a normal person crazy. And I mean really crazy. You know, like if it's drawing and I'm learning how to do a particular type of shading, or I can sit there and just over and over and over and over again draw the same lines until they look the way that they're supposed to look. And that could be 2 hours. And most people won't do that. That's really
Wow.
boring. They just want to draw something cool. And I can sit there and for whatever the discipline is, I'll sit there and I'll just do the fundamentals, and the fundamentals are interesting enough to me that I'm never bored. So I think that's a huge advantage. And that's why I say there's so much depth in the simplicity of fundamentals that people miss because they're looking for a complex answer to really what could be very simple for most of us, and should be very simple for most of us. You know, I'm not trying to shave off 0.2 seconds to win a gold medal, right? I'm training for life. I'm training to be fit for life. So because of that, it's quite simple what I need. And I just have to embrace that simplicity and spend time consistently with the fundamentals that are so powerful.
Wow. And you mentioned this simplicity. How did you say it? Simplicity.
Simplicity is genius.
Simplicity is genius, and I love the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
It's just, and that's why it takes the RAM off your brain to just work. And you mentioned this. You're willing to do what it takes to perfect the basics. I was just I'm working on my jerk, and the funny thing is, I don't want to compete. I have no interest in getting on the platform. I have no interest in winning anything. I have just, and I cannot explain it, and a massive interest in mastering these lifts because I'm so incredibly in love with them.
Yeah.
And I was rewatching some of my stuff, so I was just like, oh, wow, in the jerk, the bump, I do not fully extend the hip. And I've seen this so many times. I'm like, I go instantly into the second dip. I don't take enough time for the bump to really transfer the energy from the legs into the arms. So with this epiphany moment yesterday, I don't know, yesterday it was just a special day. I came in today. I was like, the first thing that I got up, I got in the first coaching, got into the gym, picked up 212s. I was like, let's give it a shot. Boom, boom. And I was like, Funny thing is, I tried it again later in the afternoon. I was like, oh, now I'm missing it again.
Yeah.
And,
But
and
this is what it is.
that's
Some
what it is.
days, some days yes, some days no.
Wow.
Right? 2 days yes, 3 days no. Eventually, more days yes, less days no. Right? But it all comes from you being aware and you looking at just a fundamental thing. I mean, why is it so important when you're beginning your session after you warm up? Why should people start with the bump? Why not? Why do sets of bumps first?
Yeah.
Because it's the first movement. It's the first, right? It's the first mechanic of the movement. If it's not good, everything will follow from there. Right? It's so important. But what do? We jump ahead and we're like, okay, I'm going to do a set right now. I'm going to do some jerks. I'm going to start off with my 16s. Then I'm going to go to this. I think I'm doing 28s today. I'm doing right? I'm getting to the sexy. I'm going to try and hit this number today.
Yeah.
I got my clock set up. Everything's good to go. No, nobody wants to look at the bumps as the practice. Bumps are a practice, man. That's the foundation. If the foundation is good, everything is good. If the foundation isn't there, what you do after that doesn't really matter. You're building it on a weak foundation.
And the crazy thing is, it is, like you mentioned, from a marketing perspective, it is utterly boring. When I tell people, well, that's even Dan John said this, and I see this in our practice as well. What do you do with people? Well, some deadlifts, some presses, some squats. Well, and then some deadlifts, some presses, some squats. Well, and how do you progress? Well, then after you got some strong with some deadlifts, they understand the hinge. Let's start some swinging. Yeah, and then we'll swing, press, squat. And then, well, maybe a prowler, push and pull, awesome. Yeah. And, well, this is like a year into the program. Well, swing, press, squat. And that doesn't sound sexy. And I had Mike Salemi.
It's how you cook it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. You ever have a really great meal that only had a few ingredients?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the ingredients weren't that foreign to you, but just the way it was presented.
Yeah.
Boxing is really simple. Boxing is 1, 2, 3, right? It's not complicated. It's quite simple at the end of the day. But people will go and spend a lifetime doing it. Right? Mm-hmm. Why? Because of the way it's put together, because of the way that the class is run, because of the way the coach puts the drills together. Mm-hmm. The ingredients are very simple. Mm-hmm. But every time that you get to the coach presents it slightly differently. He cooks it differently that day for you, right? Mm-hmm. It has a new taste, but it's all the same ingredients.
And you know where I see the dichotomy? You mentioned that the ingredients are the same, but the presenting, the cooking is different. Where I see the huge dichotomy is that actual experts sometimes do not get this concept. Mm-hmm. They know that the fundamentals are where it's at. They know that they're not sexy, but they do not spend any time in making it that saying where you can lead the horse to the water, but you can't force it to drink. But at least you can lead the horse to the water. How do you lead it? Well, with some sugar, we gotta put up some. That's why I do so much on the YouTube channel. That's why I do these reactions. That's why I do because I want to lead people to this beautiful art of kettlebell training. Where some people are maybe, and we get the feedback, we're like, wow, your reviews are actually making me realize that the way I've used it was kind of like a little off. And then I'm always like, well, at least you've been using a kettlebell. That's awesome. And now you're maybe discovering that there's more to it, right? Yeah. And I think the experts have to do a better job in packaging it that way, not overextend, but still from a marketing perspective, we have to play the game to a certain extent. Do you agree?
No, I agree. You have to find a way to make people fall in love with the fundamentals. That's what it is. That's and what it is. There's a lot of different ways to do that, and that's fine. But you have to get them excited about it. And part of it is to be able, sometimes it's a stunt. Sometimes you do a stunt. Okay, I've I've gone through that phase where I windmill people and Turkish get up them and whatever. And, you do your stunts and gets people excited and they get interested, and you tell them, man, that's just a result of the fundamentals. You train the fundamentals and you can do this crazy stuff, So these things sometimes are good and they're necessary. And that's not bad marketing, especially if you approach it with the, hey, that's not about what I can do. That's about what you could do. Anything that I can do, you can do. It's transferable. That's the cool thing. Like, come on, I'll show you how to do it. Come with me, So I think that, that's okay. And it is how you prepare it. It's how you cook the ingredients. It's how you present it. And, even if you're good and you have something good to show, you do have to constantly be asking yourself, like, how am I going to get people? How am I going to get the average person excited about putting in this amount of work to get this return, especially in a day and age where we used to instant return. We used to, I want it now. I want everything now. So it's hard, it's a hard thing, but and that's why people water things down and dumb it down and, do it this way and that way, because they're like, hey man, if I did it the way my coach did it, nobody would be here. But these are excuses. The truth is you can do it well and you can do it honestly and you can do it maybe the way that you were taught it and share it. You just got to get people fired up about learning it that way. And if you explain to them why it's so valuable, they'll respond, they'll react to it. I believe it. So you just have to get people excited, like, hey, there's a lot of people that like fast food, but if you sit them down and get them a real meal by somebody who really knows what they're doing, blow their mind, they'll think twice about, fast food.
Definitely. Yeah.
So it's all how you present it.
On a final note, Shawn, just to get your last thoughts on the snatch. The way I read it in Pavel's books and the way I understand it when it comes to, we talked about efficiency, and I talked with Paul the same thing. When you start hoisting a 24 kg, I don't know, I don't care how heavy. If you start hoisting it for a couple of minutes, we are engaging into more of a cardiovascular system. We are engaging into more heavy, efficient work that needs to be done. So it's not, I like how you put it, it's not high tension. This is high volume, so there's different patterns. And Paul even said this. Paul said, people mess it up when they use a pattern or a system that works for one modality and use it on the other one. You mentioned the breathing. It depends. Well, Valsalva breathing, where you got to keep the air in when you do heavy stuff, yes. But the normal breathing, that's when you do cardiovascular stuff. So they say in hardstyle philosophy, and again, not to knock anybody, it's just on a quest of truth. They say, well, we use as much force, or we use as much muscular contraction to hoist that weight in order to fire up all the muscle fibers. That's why we do it. Yes, we know it's inefficient, but we are doing it for that purpose. So what's your thoughts on?
Two things. One, look, you can do that, and there are people that do that and they're fabulously fit and they're strong, they're healthy, and this is how they play with the weights. Fine, right? But look, if you said the same thing about barbell, it would not sound a little silly to you? I snatch a barbell inefficiently because it fires all my muscle fibers. But it doesn't seem a little, right? No, I snatch a barbell efficiently because it's the most efficient path to move the weight. And because of that, the ceiling for how much I lift goes from here to here, right? Because I'm moving better. And what do I always want to practice? I want to practice moving efficiently. I want to be effective, right? And what is the effective measured by in this? It's the ability to move the weight from the backswing to fixation, right? That's what it is. How many times can I do that? So, and if you're telling me we're going to do it multiple times and we're going to, then I want to do that in the most efficient way. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure that that's the reason why they do that. I believe it's harder. And I'm not saying that there's no value in the high tension, because there is value in high tension. But you take the average person who walks in my gym, and especially the average fit person even, and you tell me, Shawn, I want you to show them high tension or high volume. Which one's going to be easier for them to get faster? It's the high tension. Easy, for sure. Why? Because all I'm asking them is to do is get tight. Get tight, get tight, get tight. Especially if they've done other training, it's easier to get it across, right? The high volume has got more sophistication. I'm not saying that it's better, and again, it's tools. It's screwdriver.
It's tools. That's
okay?
what's up. Yes.
So don't, like anybody listening, don't get overly excited. There's times where there's tension and it's great and it's awesome. But look, let's be honest. Getting someone to understand high volume, getting someone to understand selective tension, getting someone to understand turning off muscles while others are on, it's more sophisticated. It takes longer to learn.
Yeah.
So maybe that is more the reason why you do something than it is
because of the difficulty level that involves. And yeah, that was one of the thoughts that came across as well. And
what is easier? Put your hand in the middle. Okay.
Yeah.
Shoulders down, back, right? Punch, right? Whip it over the knuckles. Is that easier to understand and easier to learn? Turn everything on, or I want you to unlock. I want you to roll it down. I want you to re-grip around the height of the navel. I want you, when you're coming into the backswing, you may want to extend the legs to get the J shape, to get the trajectory of the bell going up so we can feel weightlessness here in the backswing. Then I want you to bias to one side. So there's going to be a counterbalance. As your bell comes in front, you're going to slightly move your head and your trunk behind the line. Then you're going to glide in for the...
It sounds like ballet to me. I love it.
I don't know. Like, I'm not a marketing genius, but maybe if you want to mass market something to a lot of people, maybe the grip it and rip it made more sense. Don't know. I'm not smart enough for
I love it. Hey, Shawn, listen, almost 2 hours. I highly appreciate it. It's
my pleasure.
Luca told me, he was like, yeah, you got to talk to Shawn. You got to talk to Shawn. He's also considered one of the hybrids. I was like, oh, yep. And
I like that.
I love it.
Says to me, you're a hybrid. That's why I said, like, when I say something, and I know some people that they'll get annoyed, but look, if you kind of just dispassionately just listen to what I'm saying, and you will see, like, some people look at my Instagram, they go, oh, so you teach kettlebell sport? I'm like, no, not at all. I teach volume and I teach tension, and I try to teach when you should use either tool. I'm not married to any of them. I'm not in a camp. I'm not married to any of these different things. I don't belong to any one of these groups, and I don't ascribe to any of styles. I don't believe in that whatsoever. I teach how to use the tool towards a given end safely. That's the end.
It takes, powerful stuff, and that requires, it requires some from us folks, because I was a little bit entrenched into this kettlebell sport thinking. It requires some opening up. It requires some looking around, and it requires some diligent searching to be like, listen, everything has its place.
Yes.
Shawn, on a final note, we have this thing that I'm trying to get off the ground. When you mentioned this, I was like, oh, I got to ask him. I call it the Kettlebell Avengers. I have now 21 people that I've done the podcast with. And we've had one of these a couple of weeks ago where Luca, and Kat's Kettlebell Dojo, Luca from Canada, Kat's Kettlebell Dojo from New Zealand, we got together and we had a conversation. Yep. So I just want to ask, would you be interested if I shoot one of these emails? Steve Cotter will hopefully be a part next time, where we get together and then just have a conversation about kettlebells and stuff. Would you be interested?
Yes. And Steve and I will tease each other mercilessly, so just be prepared.
Love it.
we are always very poorly behaved when we're together.
I love it. You're actually, all the people that I had on, and what I see from you is this, and who said this? Somebody told me this. He said, Paul was similar. He said, I have this strange inability to not sugarcoat anything. Mm-hmm. That's maybe my Irish background that I have. And, we can be real and not be mercilessly divisive, right? But be real and open up and be like, listen, that's what it is to a certain extent. Yes, we're open to other ideas and stuff,
Yeah.
but as far as we know it, that's what it is, and no offense taken, and no offense given, right?
No, I'm not offended by someone's opinion. If you have a different opinion than mine, it's fine. And when I always warn you, when you ask for mine, just be careful you really wanted to hear what it is.
I love it. Hey, Shawn, I really appreciate your time. It was awesome. I'll let you know when it's up. And with this Kettlebell Avengers thing, I just send an email out. And then when you're open and you have time, you jump in, and then we're going to do it.
Amazing. Thank you, man.
Thank you so much, Shawn. And catch you on the next one.
90 Days of Kettlebells is an online workout course for beginners who want to train at home, lose weight, and achieve lasting results without wasting time and money with crash diets and unused gym memberships. The program works as follows. You will do 3 kettlebell workouts per week that gradually increase in difficulty. You'll also build 3 powerful eating habits that have proven successful in our coaching. As the name implies, the program lasts 90 days and you will have lifelong access after purchase. We also include live accountability sessions where you will publicly state your goals. Psychology shows us that if we make our goals public, our adherence to the process and the program increases dramatically. If you have been struggling to put together an elaborate kettlebell workout system while trying to lose weight, then 90 Days of Kettlebells is for you. The price of 90 Days of Kettlebells is $59 per month for 3 months, and you can save 20% with a one-time payment of $147. We'll open registration only to a small number of new clients. Join the waiting list now to get access 24 hours before the general public. Link is in the description.